Welcome back to a new episode of turning viral AI slop into lovingly crafted objects. This is a continuation of the niche fruits, and in this video I'll tackle the lemon, blueberry, starfruit, and pear. The difficulty level of this project is very high, possibly the hardest tutorial I've ever made for YouTube. Under normal circumstances, I tend to stay in my comfort zone of making cute squishies in simple shapes and colors. But since AI doesn't care about real-world physics, it also forces me to push artistic boundaries. There were so many factors that came into play here, such as the opacity and consistency of silicone, the material required for the molds, and how to add details that don't come off with movement. I ended up developing several new techniques that could be useful for anyone interested in making very complex tabby squishies. Let's get started with the lemon first. This one has become a huge meme because of its resemblance to iShowSpeed when he tries not to laugh during a live stream. This is not an easy shape to sculpt, but I feel like I've gained enough experience after making the previous AI fruit videos. I'm adding pieces of soft polymer clay to build up the details. Then I'm smoothing it down with a tool and trying to capture the exact same facial expression. The most important part is to get the puckered mouth correct from every angle. I'm also making a lot of tiny dents into the surface to get that ultra-realistic lemon peel texture. This came out really nicely after baking, but the hardest step is to transfer all these details into a mold. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that the clay model often gets destroyed in the process of making the mold. However, I put too much work into this one and I really don't want to risk anything happening to it just in case the mold doesn't turn out well. So instead of silicone putty, I'm going to use liquid molding silicone. This is basically how professional molds are made, but I've never been a huge fan of this method because it's also more expensive and time-consuming. I got these two bottles, which already cost as much as the same amount of tabby squishy gel. I also greatly underestimated how much silicone is needed to fill up the negative space. I mixed up 200 grams, which doesn't even cover half the lemon. I have to transfer this into a smaller container and add another 200 grams. I ended up using the entire 2 bottles, which makes this an extremely expensive process. But the mold turned out perfectly, which I suppose makes everything worth it. The great thing about liquid silicone is that it picks up the tiniest details, including the texture on the lips and skin. It's also flexible enough so I can remove the model without any damage. Now I'm greasing the inside and mixing up a batch of yellow tabby silicone. In my niche apple video, the transparent tabby gel looked slightly better, so that's why I went with the same combination here. However, yellow is a tricky color because it's too bright and the details don't show up well, especially on camera. After demolding this, I'm really disappointed that you can barely see the contours at all. I also realized that the lips on the lemon are pink, which I completely forgot to make. So I'm going to redo everything, starting by carefully applying pink silicone up to the lip line and waiting for it to cure. Instead of a transparent lemon yellow, I'm using a milky silicone base and adding more beige undertones. You can see the massive difference here. Playing with the opacity of a tabby squishy can really change the appearance. For extremely complex designs, you need to start with a milky silicone and use pigment containing titanium white. This provides the necessary base so that the shadows cast by creases are more visible. Next up is the blueberry, and I decided to start with a cheap no-brand polymer clay. This is from a discount store and has the texture of plasticine. It's actually a lot easier to sculpt than Fimo, but I have to be very careful not to accidentally squish the details. I find that every niche fruit has a distinct facial feature that first comes to mind when you think of it. The blueberry has these cursed-looking eyes, so I really want to get them right. I'm sculpting 2 empty eye sockets that I can slice open later on. I ran into some unexpected problems with the mold for this one. I'm using silly gum, which is the most expensive putty I have, and it usually works very well. However, after demolding, I realized the face has shifted a bit, so the edge of the mold is very close to the eye. But I'm going to go ahead and make the tabby silicone anyway. I have to use a lot of pigment to get this inky dark blue shade. Unfortunately, just like the lemon, this one doesn't look right at all. The transparent base means that all the facial features aren't visible and the entire face is too tilted. So I decided to remake everything, including the mold. This time I put scratches in the polymer clay so I know exactly how far to push the putty. Then I'm switching to a translucent silicone and making the base an opaque blue-gray color. This one turned out a lot better, as you can clearly see here. However, getting the face right is only the start. The problem with making niche fruits is that every stage comes with different challenges, and messing one of these up will mean it no longer resembles the AI version. Getting the eyes correct for the blueberry is crucial, so the next step is cutting open the eyelids. I'm applying some E6000 glue and pushing a flat-back eye into the socket. This part is extremely time-consuming because I have to hold the eye down until the glue dries. Tabba silicone has a natural elasticity, so it always pushes the eye outwards. This wasn't a problem with my very first AI fruits, but as these designs have become more complex, I have to manually hold the eyes in the correct position. The result looks great so far, but it's still not complete. The next challenge is to add details on the squishy. In my niche apple video, I did this with acrylic paint, but it rubbed off very quickly after the puppet started moving. I realized the solution is right under my nose. I can simply mix E6000 glue with paint and use that instead. This is also more effective than colored silicone because that tends to be too thin and it takes ages to cure. This method works perfectly for lips as well, and it stays flexible enough not to rub off. The hardest part about working with silicone is that almost nothing sticks to it, so it becomes really difficult to add color or detail to your designs. Using E6000 and acrylic paint opens up a whole new level of creativity. The greatest irony is that copying AI has indirectly led to discovering new techniques for traditional crafting. To make the final fruit, I'm cutting out triangles from polymer clay and arranging these in a star shape. This one reminds me a bit of those whimsy goth suns from the early 2000s aesthetic. The biggest challenge here is that I want to make the lips separately. I find the creepiest part of the niche starfruit are the lips. These don't fade into the face like the lemon, but they appear entirely stuck on. So I'm molding them on their own as well and adding some pink silicone. Another feature of the starfruit is the buggy-looking eyes. These only seem attached to the lower lids, so I'm pushing them downwards until the glue is dry. Then I'm cutting a hole for the mouth and carefully gluing the lips around it. This requires a lot of meticulous work to make sure the lips don't touch each other. Once done, I'm using a hair clip to check that it can still open and close. Another unexpected hurdle in this video is finding a real starfruit. Austria in November is probably one of the worst times to look for starfruit, and I checked through 3 giant supermarkets for a week before finding one. This doesn't look ripe at all though, and I'm pretty sure it's not very edible in this state. The other fruits were easier to find, so I'm cutting them up into pieces to fit the puppets. All the ASMR sound effects are made by me eating apples into the microphone. This time, I noticed that some of the niche fruit clips had a crunchy chewing noise as well, so I experimented with cereal and nuts. Then I layered the sounds over each other. The starfruit's mouth is the smallest, but it still works quite well for a tiny piece of fruit. In the original AI video, they shove an entire star-shaped slice into his mouth, which I really like, but unfortunately this didn't work in real life. Next up is the niche pear, and I love his slightly sinister expression compared to the stoic one of the apple. Mine looks almost a bit too cute, but the size and shape works perfectly. The lemon turned out surprisingly well, considering the complexity of the mouth. My goal for this one is to have it eat the lemon slice, then turn towards the camera and make the eyeshow speed face. Last but not least, we have the niche blueberry, and this one turned out truly cursed in a good way. I think it really hits that uncanny valley spot. I had to add a lot of pigment to get this color, and that affected the curing process a bit. It made the silicone softer, which is why it doesn't hold its shape as well. But all things considered, I think this one still has an eerie resemblance to the original. A final thing I wanted to retry in this video was the tongue effect. I did this with a niche apple, but the squishy tongue I made was a bit too short. The idea is to pull the tongue inside the head and then play the clip in reverse. The apple version had a few unwanted facial expressions because of the way the tongue snapped back into the face. I felt I could make this transition a lot smoother by having a longer piece that I can hold on to. So I made a new mold and filled it with the same pink silicone from the Starfruit lips. Unfortunately, this one turned out way too flimsy. So I redid everything using the thick cream textured silicone from this video. This one came out with the perfect consistency. It has a heaviness to it which makes it easy to pull into the squishy without creating any rebound movement. When reversed, this effect looks hilarious. This niche fruit project started as pure silliness and to poke some fun in the AI debate. However, after making many videos on this topic, I realized it goes quite a bit deeper than that. A lot of online meme culture and AI slop reminds me of Dadaism and surrealism. These are art movements characterized by randomness and curated juxtapositions. For instance, many people know this painting by Rene Magritte. It's famous because it asks an existential question of what is real. This is not a pipe, because it's actually a painting. Many years ago, I had the sticker on the back of my laptop, which was inspired by another Magritte piece. I loved it because it's asking if this is an apple above the logo on a physical piece of technology. Are we talking about a real apple, or the imagery of an apple, or the company itself, which has nothing at all to do with fruits? In the same way, I feel that AI has started to force people to question reality by creating slop that is both inspired by but also devoid of things we recognize. Lots of people only like these niche fruits because it reminds them of real things, like the annoying orange or Speed's livestream moment when he tries to keep a straight face after hearing someone's mom was kind of homeless. The fruits on their own are just soulless slop, but they become real after people give them meaning. To me, it's this reaction ecosystem that makes AI art interesting. AI isn't art, obviously, but it's the way that humans react to it that makes it worthy of attention. I really love making these videos and I have so many ideas lined up, so please subscribe if you want to see more. I'm Joanna, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!